Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we tear through the sources to bring you the core knowledge you need. Today, we are focusing on the monumental power of really just one individual, Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi.
A name you might know.
You might, but his true cultural and political influence, spanning an entire millennium, is it's absolutely staggering.
Indeed. We're talking about a poet whose life, it spanned from 940 to 1025. And his incredible creation, the Shahnameh,
The Book of Kings.
the Book of Kings, it's widely credited with doing something that just sounds miraculous.
That is.
The preservation of the Persian language itself. And, by extension, the entire pre-Islamic Iranian cultural identity.
That is a massive claim to make about a single work of literature. I mean, for comparison, we really have to grasp the sheer scale of this idea of linguistic survival.
Right. And our sources give us this really profound anecdote. It's a question that was put to a leading Egyptian historian about the fate of the Coptic language.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the question was simple, but it's kind of devastating. Why do most Egyptians, who are the heirs to one of the world's greatest pre-Islamic civilizations, now speak Arabic? Why not Coptic, the language of their ancestors?
And the historians reply, it's what gives you the real measure of Ferdowsi's achievement.
He just said, very simply, because we had no Ferdowsi.
Just think about that for a second. The existence of one epic poem, 60,000 couplets long, is given as the reason why Persian, unlike so many other indigenous languages in conquered lands, survived the trauma of the 7th century Arab conquest.
And not just survived, but continued to flourish. It became the major literary and cultural language that we know today.
That really sets the stakes for our deep dive today.
It does. So our mission is to unpack the intense historical and political pressures that were going on when this epic was created.
And then we'll delve into its structure, some of its most compelling, really tragic legends that kind of establish the identity of the Iranian people.
And finally, we'll trace its surprising, enduring footprints, culturally, politically, literarily, all over the globe, right up to our own time.
Okay, let's get into it. We have to start with the man himself and his world, who was Ferdowsi, and what put him in this unique position to take on just a mammoth task.
Ferdowsi was born in the year 940 in Tus, which is in Khorasan, a really crucial region in northeast Iran.
And he came from a specific social class, right?
A very important one. He belonged to the Dekwan. This was the wealthy, often hereditary landowning class.
So what made them so important?
Well, after the Sasanian Empire collapsed, they were basically the key custodians of tradition, of Zoroastrianism, Pahlavi literature, the memory of the ancient kings. They were, you could say, the living link to pre-Islamic Persia.
So his background gave him the time, the education, the access to the materials he would need. But the timing of his life was even more critical.
Oh, absolutely. His life coincided with this major political and cultural upheaval that historians now call the Iranian intermezzo.
The internet.
Precisely. It's this period, roughly a century long, starting in the mid-10th century, where these Iranian regional powers started to chip away at the authority of the central Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad.
And this wasn't just a political split, was it? It was a much deeper cultural shift.
It was. And there was a real political necessity behind it that was tied directly to identity. You see, after the Arab conquest, these new regional dynasties popped up, and they needed sophisticated, deep-rooted models of kingship to legitimize their rule.
To rule over these incredibly diverse populations.
Right, many of whom still had these powerful memories of the Sasanian era. New rulers realized pretty quickly that just adopting the caliphal system wasn't enough for regional authority.
So they looked backwards.
They looked back to the glories of ancient Persia. They strategically adopted these ancient Persian kingship models to establish their own dominance.
So who are the key players in this strategic identity game that sort of set the stage for the Shahnameh?
Well, we really need to focus on two competing dynasties from Ferdowsi's lifetime. First, you have the Samanids. They controlled Khorasan and Transoxiana.
And they were all in on this cultural revival.
Completely. The Samanids actively encouraged the revival of New Persian as an official language. They sponsored early literature in that language. And crucially, they claimed direct descent from Bahram Chubina.
A famous general from the Sasanian tradition.
Yeah.
And a major hero in the Shahnameh itself.
Exactly. So they were explicitly tying their current power to that ancient royal lineage.
And their rivals, the Buyids, they were doing the exact same thing, even though they weren't ethnically Persian.
And that's what makes the Buyid case so fascinating. They were of Arab origin, but to legitimize their control over Western Iran and even Baghdad itself, they claimed descent from the famous Sasanian king Bahram 50.
Known in the epic as Bahram Gur, the Hunter King.
Right. And both of these dynasties consciously revived the ultimate Sasanian royal title, King of Kings, or Shahanshah. They were leveraging deep cultural memory to solidify their power, which created the perfect cultural climate for an epic about those very kings.
So the Shahnameh wasn't just born from some literary nostalgia. It was, in a way, a vital political document. It was driven by this need for a unifying, glorious historical narrative.
Absolutely.
So where did Ferdowsi get the actual material to build this history?
The main foundation was the Sasanian Book of Kings, the Shahnameh. This was an official historical chronicle of their monarchs. The key step, though, happened right in Ferdowsi's hometown of Tus.
Right, this was the prep work that came before his own massive effort.
Exactly. A descendant of this noble local family sponsored a group of scholarsmen who were just steeped in the Pahlavi language and the Zoroastrian worldview to pull together all these dispersed pre-Islamic documents.
And what did that produce?
A complete prototype prose version of the Shahnameh in New Persian. It was finished around 957. Ferdowsi took this meticulously collected material and then spent the next 35 years versifying it into the epic we have today.
35 years. Incredible amount of labor. And this brings us to one of history's greatest literary ironies, the dedication. After all that work celebrating Iranian glory and kingship, Ferdowsi dedicated the work to Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni.
It was a necessity, but also just a catastrophic miscalculation. By the time Ferdowsi finished, the Samanids were gone. Mahmud of Ghazni reigned from 997 to 1030, was the main power in the region. He was the only patron who could really offer the epic protection and fame.
So Ferdowsi hoped to inspire him, to make him a new champion of ancient Persian glory.
He did, but looking at the sources, Mahmud seems fundamentally incompatible with everything the Shahnameh stands for.
Right. How could a man like him possibly appreciate it?
He couldn't, or at least he wouldn't. Mahmud was a militant Sunni ruler, fiercely loyal to the Abbasid Caliphate, and this is crucial, he was the grandson of a Turkic slave.
So his lineage was completely outside the traditional Iranian aristocratic structure.
Exactly. And the Shahnameh, on the other hand, was this undeniable celebration of Iranian royal destiny. It's marked by pro-royalist and, often strong anti-Arab and anti-Turk sentiments.
And our sources even suggest it had pro-Shia sympathies, which would have been deeply offensive to Mahmud's pro-caliphate Sunni court.
Precisely. The epic basically embodied everything the new Ghaznavids, who relied on Orthodox Sunni legitimacy and military might, were trying to move beyond. The sources really confirm that Mahmud was just profoundly unlikely to appreciate a work that celebrated the past glories of a civilization he was actively displacing.
Or worse, one that hinted at alternative Shia political systems.
Yeah. So the epic was rejected. It wasn't just a lukewarm response, it was effectively ignored.
For a while, yes. The rejection, which was probably spurred on by jealousy from the established court poets, led to the Shahnameh just sinking into near oblivion for a staggering 2 centuries after Ferdowsi's death. But that conflict became a legend in itself.
It did. It cemented Ferdowsi's status as a kind of martyr for Persian culture. The story of the poor poet arriving at the capital only to have his life's work slighted by this ignorant foreign tyrant.
That's a fascinating thought, though. If Mahmud had embraced the epic and brought it into his court, an anti-Iranian court, would it have kept its fierce, independent cultural power?
That's a critical question.
Or did the rejection, the martyrdom of the epic, ultimately enhance its legendary status? Did it allow it to become a pure symbol of Iranian resistance and identity when it finally resurfaced centuries later?
I think you're right. The political utility of the poem was lost at first, but its symbolic power, its poetic integrity, and the fact that it wasn't contaminated by the Ghaznavids allowed it to become truly national, rather than just a dynastic symbol. When it was rediscovered, it was already framed as this relic of a pure Iranian spirit, untainted by foreign rule.
So despite that initial political neglect, the Shahnameh's brilliance just established it instantly among literary scholars.
Oh yeah. Our sources rank it as the greatest Eastern national epic. They compare it, and worthily so, to the Indian Nala, the German Nibelungen, and of course, the Homeric Iliad.
It's a comparison.
It is. It's really the true starting point for all of Neo-Persian literature. It offers this breathtaking scope that spans from the mythical first king all the way up to the historical Arab conquest. A complete view of the heroic age of Persia.
An age defined by war, love, Intricate chivalry.
And while the Shahnameh is structured around the reigns of kings, it is a book of kings, it's so important to remember that the core emotional heart of the entire work rests not on a monarch, but on the great hero Rustem.
Right. Rustem provides this necessary contrast to the endless cycle of kings rising and falling.
His heroism is constant, even when the rulers he serves are flawed, or proud, or just cruel.
But before we get to the heroic age, we need to understand the foundational myths that really established the Persian cosmos. So let's look at the Pishtadian dynasty, starting with the first king, Kayumers. What does he represent?
Kayumers represents that first leap towards civilization. He's the original man, said to have lived in the mountains, wearing clothes made from the skins of leopards and other beasts.
And his big achievement.
He established the very first code of laws. He moved humanity from this primal chaos to an organized society. His authority was so great, apparently, that even wild animals submitted to his rule.
But that idyllic phase is very short-lived. It signals that even at the dawn of creation, chaos and evil are already there.
Indeed. The first crisis comes in the form of a hideous demon whose son is equally fierce and wants to destroy this new human order.
And Kayumers' own son, Saimuk, he bravely leads an army,
But he rushes into combat and is tragically slain by the demon's offspring. This sets a tone right away. The battle between light and darkness, order and chaos, is immediate, and it is costly.
The narrative then moves pretty quickly to Hushing, who gives us the second great advancement, the discovery of fire.
And Hushing's discovery is portrayed as completely accidental, but also divinely significant.
How so?
He's walking along a mountainside. He comes across this terrifying monster eyes, like fountains of blood, exhaling thick smoke. Hushing, in self-defense, grabs a huge stone and throws it. It misses the monster, but it hits a jutting rock instead.
Creating a spark?
An intense, bright spark. And the fire that results from it consumes the creature. So the fire is both a practical tool and the spiritual symbol of defeating primeval darkness.
And Hushing understands this immediately.
He does. He establishes the festival of Sita to commemorate it, declaring the flame the light of the divinity. This is celebrated as the foundation of fire worship, which is a huge component of the later Zoroastrian cosmology that so profoundly shaped Iranian identity.
He also introduces agriculture, blacksmithing.
The use of furs for clothing. Hushing basically organized the elements of human survival.
Okay, moving on to Tomers, who has this dramatic title, The Binder of Demons. This shows the battle against the supernatural was far from over.
Tahumers was famous for taming animals, another step in mastering the environment. But his greatest victory was intellectual. He managed to capture a group of demons.
And they didn't go quietly.
No, their brethren gathered for war, but Tahumers conquered them and threatened to destroy the captured demons entirely.
And how did the demons save themselves? They bartered with knowledge.
They pleaded for their lives, promising to teach him a profound and wonderful art in exchange for mercy.
And that art was?
Reading and writing. They taught him letters, script, and illuminated his mind with learning. And this narrative structure is so potent. Knowledge, literacy, intellectual mastery, they're all derived directly from overcoming the forces of darkness and subjugating them to human will. Civilization is the triumph over chaos.
Finally, before the tyranny of Zohak arrives, we have this golden age under Jamshid. He sounds less like a king and more like a culture hero, a Persian Prometheus.
Jamshid is definitely the peak of that Pishtadian era. He was known for learning and wisdom, and his reign is described as a paradise, an incredible 700 years where none of his subjects suffered death or disease.
And he's credited with these monumental inventions.
Armor, caresses, swords, the weaving of silk, building seafaring vessels, all of it.
And his architectural feats, the sources say, relied on subjugated supernatural labor.
Yes, the legendary demon train. Jamshid commanded this unholy demon train to mix water and clay to make bricks, and they built these massive foundations, high turrets, towers, magnificent palaces.
Which again reinforces that idea of order built on top of chaos.
It does. It emphasizes that the greatest achievements of early Iranian civilization, the very structures of its society, were built on the coerced labor of demonic, foreign, or chaotic forces, establishing the superiority of the king's divine mandate.
And his final lasting achievement, still celebrated today, is the New Year festival.
He created the Nowruz festival, the Persian New Year. The epic describes him sitting on this magnificent jewel-embellished throne, and he commands his demons to raise it high into the air. On that day, his rule was so perfect that mortals, genii, demons, even Paris, these beautiful spiritual beings, all celebrated equally with wine and music.
It was the zenith of cosmic harmony.
A moment that tragically came right before his fall through excessive pride.
Jimshid's pride, claiming to be God himself, disrupted the cosmic balance. And that leads inevitably to his fall and the rise of the terrifying Zohak, the serpent tyrant.
This is where the narrative descends into darkness and foreign domination.
And Zohak's path to power is this chilling lesson in ambition and manipulation. It starts with Iblis, who is Satan's counterpart, acting as a tempter.
Right. Iblis first appears disguised as a helpful stranger to Zohak, who's just a prince at this point. The scene convinces Zohak that his elderly father, Mirtastazi, is old and worthless, and suggests he should be removed so Zohak can take the throne.
And under terror and oath, Zohak agrees to the unthinkable.
He does.
Yeah.
And the murder itself is just an act of vile, concealed treachery. It's not an honorable fight. Iblis digs a deep, hidden pit on the path to the king's house of prayer and covers it with grass. The king falls in, breaks his limbs, and dies.
The wickedness is just palpable.
It is. The poet reflects that the father was so tender he wouldn't even let the winds blow too roughly on his son.
And the ultimate horror, Zohak's defining feature as a tyrant, comes with Iblis's twisted reward for his service.
Iblis returns, this time disguised as a skilled servant, and in this moment of false humility, he kisses Zohak's shoulders. And from the exact spots where the fiend's lips touched, 2 black serpents immediately spring up.
A terrifying image.
And when Zohak looks for a cure, Iblis reappears, now disguised as a physician, and offers this chilling diagnosis. There is no remedy. But he does offer a way to prolong Zohak's life. The serpents require a daily feeding of human brains.
That detail, feeding them 2 young men's brains every single day, is the most potent symbol of his tyranny.
And of Iblis's ultimate goal. It was a vile stratagem to destroy mankind, a way to systematically wipe out the human race over time, starting with the youth. And this horrific requirement sets the stage for the popular uprising.
An uprising sparked by Kawa, the blacksmith, a voice for the common people.
Kawa is the ultimate symbol of righteous populist fury. Zohak's regime demanded that 2 of Kawa's own children be killed that day to feed the serpents. In an act of just profound indignation, Kawa marches before the king. He tears up the hated register of blood, throws it on the ground, and reviles the king as he storms out.
He didn't just leave, though. He instantly created the banner for the revolution.
He took his simple leather apron, the one stained from his blacksmithing work. He fixed it to a javelin point and used it as a banner to rally the masses. This simple apron became the Darash Gavani, the sacred royal standard of Persia, later adorned with gold and jewels.
And it forever symbolizes that legitimate Persian sovereignty comes not just from divine right, but from popular will and resistance against tyranny.
Kawa rallies the people to the true dynastic savior Feridun. But central to the whole narrative, the character whose deeds provide the emotional and military backbone of the epic is Rustem.
And his origin is almost as tragic as the heroes he fights for.
It is. Rustem's story is tied to his father Zal, and it's foundational. Zal, the son of the great warrior Sam, was born with startling white skin and albino. This horrified his parents. They saw it as demonic or cursed, and they did the awful act of abandoning him on the slopes of Mount Damavand.
The ultimate foundling narrative, saved by his supernatural protector.
The mythical Simorgh, a magnificent, enormous bird whose wingspan was so great it cast the land into shadow when she flew. She took the forsaken Zal to her high nest, nourished him, and raised him as her own son.
And when Zal was finally rediscovered and reunited with his human family, the Simorgh gave him one crucial object.
A single feather from her own wing, the ultimate magical lifeline. The instruction was clear. Whenever Zal or his descendants faced mortal danger, he should place the feather on a fire, and the Simorgh would instantly appear to ensure their safety.
This feather is the promise of divine intervention. It ensures the line of great heroes will survive any earthly threat.
And the fate of the entire nation then rested on the birth of Rustem, a union that required careful planning. Zal fell in love with Rubáiyát, who was tragically from the lineage of the Serpent King Zohak.
So their union was opposed.
It was. It was only sanctioned after astrologers predicted that their offspring, Rustem, would be the greatest world-conquering hero Persia had ever seen. The stakes for this birth could not have been higher.
And Rustem's life is defined by these superhuman achievements, most famously his 7 labors, the Heftkan.
The Hefkon are not just fights, they are trials. They test endurance, strategy, spiritual fortitude, often undertaken to rescue the flawed King Khaos.
Let's take the first one.
Rustem, exhausted, falls asleep. A furious lion attacks. His faithful colossal horse, Rakush, doesn't wait for him to wake up. Rakush battles and slays the beast alone.
And Rustem's reaction?
He's actually angry. He demands that Rakush alert him next time. He sees the horse's independent heroism as an insult to his own duty.
It sets the tone for his immense, almost arrogant strength. What about the second and third labors?
The second is surviving the maddening thirst of a burning desert. He nearly succumbs. He's saved only when he sees a wild sheep that leads him to a hidden fountain. The third stave is the confrontation with the dragon serpent.
Their 80-yard monster.
Yes, and Rustem is tricked by a magical disguise. He sees nothing on the first two alarms from Rakush, and he gets furious. Only on the third alarm does the light appear, revealing the true form of this monstrous dragon. It's a grueling, titanic battle where Rakush bites and tears at the dragon's hide while Rustem finally severs its head with his sword.
These labors establish Rustem as an insurmountable force, but all this power just serves to set up the ultimate, personal, and profoundly moving tragedy of the epic, Rustem and Sohrab.
This is maybe the greatest and most universal tragedy in Persian literature. Sohrab, Rustem's son, was raised secretly in Turan. He grew into a fierce, powerful young warrior who set out with an army specifically to find and impress his legendary father in Persia.
And when they finally meet on the battlefield, the sources describe a climactic, 2-day combat that is brutal and utterly exhausting.
And the father and son tragically failed to recognize each other. Sohrab, knowing his life's quest, actually asks Rustem directly if he is the famed champion. But Rustem, bound by politics and deep apprehension, denies his identity.
Why?
He was afraid. He feared that acknowledging a powerful, young warrior leading an invading army as his son would undermine his own standing and incite the suspicious King Khaos.
So it was political fear and pride that caused the denial.
It set the stage for the inevitable conclusion. After a grueling fight where neither titan could gain an advantage, Rustem delivers the fatal blow.
And the moment of recognition is just soul-crushing.
As Sohrab lies dying, he pulls back his armor and reveals a magnificent bracelet, the magic token that Rustem himself had given Rubáiyát before his son was born. He says that if fate had been kinder, his father would have recognized him by this token.
It's a moment Rustem realizes he has murdered his own destiny, his own future.
And the poet captures this perfect tragedy with the reflection. Hapless man alone has no instinctive feeling for his own. It's the ultimate statement on the cruel, unyielding grip of destiny.
And then the cruelty is compounded by human malice.
It is. Rustem, racked with grief, sends a plea to King Khaos for the sovereign balm, the one medicine that could heal any wound. But Khaos, fearing the combined power of the father and the young hero, spitefully denies him the balm, condemning Sohrab to death. This cold, calculated act of political fear just seals the epic's tragic, yet profoundly human message.
Moving from that ancient world of myth and tragedy to the 20th century, the role of the Shahnameh shifts dramatically. The Pahlavi dynasty sought to construct a modern national identity, but their approach privileged archaeological history over Ferdowsi's mythological history.
That's a crucial distinction. The Pahlavi-era under both Reza Shah and Mohammad Reza Shah intentionally moved away from legendary kings like Jamshid toward figures who had, material evidence.
So they focused on historical figures like Cyrus and Darius. Why were they seen as more suitable for state legitimacy than the mythic figures like Rustem?
Well, Cyrus and Darius were known through historical accounts, but the Pahlavis meticulously redefined them as national icons. Attributing the ruins of Pasargadae and Persepolis to these specific Achaemenid figures and celebrating them as masterpieces was a Pahlavi phenomenon. It was intended to showcase Iran's long, unbroken secular royal history.
So it was a strategic, top-down attempt to reshape the past.
It was. This government-oriented archaeology prioritized the history of victorious kings and centralized empires. As a result, our sources note that it often actively suppressed cultural diversity. It paid very little attention to the decentralized histories of ordinary people or the complexity of ethnic and religious minorities.
So archaeology became a tool of conformity,
designed to support a unified, victorious national narrative rather than reflecting the true complexity of Iranian history.
And this political appropriation is perfectly illustrated by the controversy around the rebuilding of Ferdowsi's own tomb. It wasn't a spontaneous act of state reverence, was it?
Not at all. Far from it. Initially, it was anti-government intellectuals, like the poet Aref Ghazvini, who were lamenting the dilapidated state of the poet's traditional tomb near Tus. They saw Ferdowsi as a symbol of pure Iranian culture being neglected by an indifferent, modernizing government.
The government, however, quickly seized that narrative.
They did. The Pahlavi government's Society for National Heritage, which was composed of political elites close to the Shah, intervened decisively. In 1934, they made this highly visible, politically situated decision to celebrate the Shahnameh millennium. They completely rebuilt the tomb into the magnificent mausoleum we see today.
So they co-opted the intellectual rebellion.
They did. They celebrated Ferdowsi as a national icon to legitimize their own ties to the ancient nation, and, at the same time, silence critics who had pointed out the neglect.
This makes Ferdowsi the cornerstone of a state-sanctioned national identity. But it's worth noting that Iranian consciousness isn't built on his national epic alone. We should briefly contrast his legacy with the two masters who followed him,
who represent different pillars of Persian identity. Ferdowsi establishes the narrative, the national foundation, but his successors provide the philosophical depth and the spiritual solace.
Let's start with Omar Khayyam. He offers the skeptical, the philosophical pillar.
Khayyam was, first and foremost, a celebrated mathematician and astronomer. His poetry reflects that sharp intellectual clarity. He embodied skepticism and a profound intellectual longing, which appealed greatly to those facing modern existential or fin du siècle despair.
He questioned everything.
Everything. His work contains this soaring indignation against the bigotry of the clergy, but he struggles to build a solid foundation of supernaturalism. He speaks to a world that feels intellectually lost and is seeking clarity through, well, wine and questioning.
And then we have Hafiz, who represents the mystical, the spiritual pillar, almost Khayyam's opposite.
Hafiz is the poet of Sufism. He offers a path of optimistic hedonism. His Sufi philosophy masterfully reconciled the old Persian spirit with Islamic faith, often using veiled language.
So he saw the divine in the everyday.
Exactly. He saw wine, love, physical beauty, not as sins, but as potent symbols of divinity. For Hafiz, to partake of worldly pleasures was a way to achieve mystical union with God, which resulted in this poetry characterized by unadulterated gladsomeness.
So while Khayyam provided the intellectual critique, and Hafiz provided the spiritual reconciliation,
Ferdowsi remains unique. He provided the monumental foundational narrative, the historical and mythological framework that defined the nation's history and preserved its language, ensuring those later philosophical and spiritual explorations could even take place in Persian.
It's just astounding that a work conceived 1,000 years ago under such political pressure hasn't just survived as a relic. It still maintains a dynamism that inspires writers globally today.
Absolutely. The vitality proves the universality of its moral and human values. The global influence of the Shahnameh now extends far beyond classics translation studies. We're seeing modern writers from vastly different cultural backgrounds and with entirely contemporary concerns picking up these ancient myths and recreating them to solve modern narrative problems.
Let's look at two prime examples of this, starting with the novel Alab al-Farsiya, or Persian Games, by the Egyptian physician Ahmed Khaled Tawfiq.
This is an Egyptian writer introducing Iranian mythology to Arab-speaking readers, which itself is a testament to the epic's ability to bridge historical divides.
It's a postmodern fantasy.
It is. It weaves the mythological atmosphere of the Shahnameh into a completely contemporary setting. Tawfiq researched the epic meticulously, driven by this deep literary interest in mythological themes. He saw a need to introduce this rich Iranian mythology to an Arab audience that might otherwise only associate Iranian history with post-Islamic contexts.
And what's fascinating is which specific character from the epic Tawfiq chose to champion in his novel.
He prominently features Ghorda Farid, the incredibly brave Iranian female warrior from the Shahnameh. She's mentioned several times, and she serves as a powerful inspiration for the protagonist, Abir.
How so?
The narrative describes Abir looking for a horseman's uniform and feeling this empowerment, thinking she could be Ghorda Farid, capable of crushing an entire army of thick mustached men.
So the epic's mythology provides a template for a powerful, heroic female agency that transcends national boundaries, giving a modern Arab protagonist a 1,000-year-old Iranian archetype to draw strength from. Now let's look at the second case study, which explores these profound themes of identity and dislocation, the Iranian-American experience.
This is poetista Kakpour's novel The Last Illusion. Kakpour, who was Iranian-born but moved to America, explicitly said that she used the Shahnameh to recover a sense of her lost Iranian identity. For her, the epic was a manifestation of childhood nostalgia, a bridge connecting her present fragmented life in the U.S. with her deep cultural past. And the novel is set in the highly tense atmosphere of the U.S. between 2000 and 2001, a time of gestating danger, which she foreshadows dramatically.
And the central character is a clear yet modern adaptation of one of the epic's major figures, Zal.
Yes. Kakpour's character, Zal, is the last child of a young rural woman in Iran named Khanum. She is so frightened by his pale albino complexion that she names him the White Demon and cages him like a bird.
A modern-day foundling, isolated and deemed terrifying because of his appearance.
And he's rescued not by the mythical Seymour, but by a very American, very modern savior.
Which is?
An American psychologist named Anthony Hendricks, who specializes in training wild children. Hendricks flies to Iran and takes Zal back to America, effectively becoming the new scientific Seymour.
But Zal still maintains his wild habits.
He does. He secretly eats insects and constantly battles the temptation to fly, a deep, persistent cultural echo of the mythical Simorg's nurturing. This modern Zal is constantly struggling with isolation, intense nostalgia for his homeland, Iran, and this desire to fly. All motifs lifted directly from the epic.
So the novel brilliantly adapts the ancient aristocratic theme of the foundling and his journey, the struggle of Zal to explore a modern multicultural identity crisis.
Yes. Zal's profound homesickness for Iran ultimately proves incompatible with his life in America, tragically breaking the heart of his American girlfriend. The timeless epic themes are repurposed to react directly to the socio-cultural setting of contemporary American multicultural society.
What's so compelling about both these contemporary adaptations is that they prove the Shahnameh is not just a dusty historical text, but a living literary foundation.
A universal language of heroic tragedy. These works move far beyond traditional literary analysis. They are actively recreating Shahnameh themes in modern fantasy and mythical novels. This continued relevance confirms that the concerns developed by Ferdowsi sovereignty, identity, betrayal, fate can and do trespass temporal and historical barriers, speaking directly to the human condition a millennium later.
So what does this entire deep dive tell us? Ferdowsi's influence is truly unique. He didn't just write a poem. He engineered a linguistic fortress that protected an entire culture under existential duress.
The Shahnameh gave Iran an enduring narrative, a deep well of mythology and tragedy that speaks to issues of sovereignty, fate, identity, and personal devastation, spanning over 1,000 years.
And we saw how that foundation has been continuously appropriated. It was used by Pahlavi kings to assert a unified, glorious national past.
A tool of statecraft, a source of political legitimacy.
Yet today, the Shahnameh primarily serves individuals, people like Kakpour, who are seeking fragmented personal identity bridges across vast geographical and cultural divides. They're using the mythic past to heal modern wounds.
And this profound shift in appropriation, from a tool wielded by kings to forge a singular unified state identity, to a source used by individuals seeking to understand their fractured multicultural selves, that is the truest measure of Ferdowsi's lasting power.
It proves that the strength of the Shahnameh is its inherent adaptability to the enduring tragedy and nobility of the human condition, regardless of who is reading it or why.
The epic survives centuries of neglect, outright political rejection by its intended patron, and attempts by modern governments to mold it into a rigid ideological tool. Its true resilience lies in its ability to inspire a writer in Egypt to celebrate female heroes and an Iranian-American writer to explore the profound feeling of displacement in 21st century New York.
So the question for you, the learner, is this. When a powerful epic shifts from serving the centralized power of kings to facilitating the fragmented individual search for identity, what does that reveal about the essence of true, lasting literary power in a globalized world?
A question worth pondering long after this deep dive is complete.
Thanks for joining us.